Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. I will talk with you about organic milk and its likely impact on human health. And thinking about it, it's about creating what I would call a kind of win-win-win situation. And what I am doing in the last, let's say, 40 years, but mainly with milk in the last 15 years, is try to reconnect several dots. What I found out together with other people. At the moment, I'm at Utrecht University, and it's at the Department of Immunopharmacology, which is not about medication, but it's much more about food. There is a lot of misunderstanding about milk and milk consumption. People are discussing that. We have seen that here as well. Should we go for vegetarian? Should we go for vegan? If you choose from milk, what kind of quality you want to have. So there are choices to make. I want to talk a little bit about why we are drinking milk. That has to do with our culture. And then I will talk about milk as a food and how we should use our milk. And that's the topics I want to address is about the raw milk, the full fat milk, and the fermented milk. So I will talk about the processing, the fat quality, and the fermentation of the milk. So we are drinking milk since quite some time. And what you see is that, especially in Europe and also, of course, in the United States, where a lot of Europeans descents are living, African herders, Mongolian herders, they got adapted to consume milk, but they did it in a different...
Don, sorry to interrupt. Can we skip the next slide? Because we just still see your first slide.
It has to do with two types of adaptation. One is a genetic adaptation, which is here in the left part of the figure. That's quite high. And those people, they can consume fresh milk, so milk with lactose. And if you go to the area, they cannot digest the lactose, and they are lactose intolerant, or they have problems with the digestion. The Mongolian herders are here, and they still use a lot of milk, but they use only the fermented milk. So they don't use the fresh milk, they use the fermented milk. Do you see the next slide? That's my first question. Or do you still see the old slide?
I still see the old slide. So if you just move down to the next one. Now we see the next slide. Thank you.
It has to do, the second one is the negative side of processing. We think that the way we drink milk is quite normal, but we only are drinking heated milk and skimmed milk and homogenized milk over the last decades, and pasteurization of milk started around the 1900s. It was to increase shelf life and to get a better zoonotic hygienic food, because it was quite some problem. There is also a negative side of this whole change in milk processing, because we see since the 1960s a huge increase of asthma and allergies, and that's also in relation to milk quality. What you see here is that it's a study from Georg Loss, published in 2011, that's among the farm children. He distinguished several groups of farm children. There were farm children who were drinking exclusively shop milk, which is UHT milk, pasteurized milk, homogenized, etc. And he compared it with the children who were exclusively drinking their own farm milk. But there were two groups of children. There were children who were drinking the boiled farm milk, and there were children who were drinking the unboiled farm milk. They were looking at the incidence of asthma, atopy, and hay fever, and you see there is an enormous reduction in the prevalence or the incidence of these diseases in the children who have been drinking any unboiled farm milk during their early life. So there is quite some connection with the raw milk in relation to the protection of asthma, allergy, and hay fever. In Utrecht, we started to do studies with mice. So these are preclinical studies. But before we started these preclinical studies, we already did a small study in multiple allergic children who were tested with the German Vorzugsmilk milk from a biodynamic farm, Hoofddannenwisch. And this milk was later on also used in a mice model. And what you see here, we have two control groups. Here on the left, you see the PBS. These are the mice who are only treated with salt. And these are, the black ones are the mice who are made allergic. So they are treated with casein and whey. If we feed these mice with raw milk or with the same raw milk, which is heated at 80 degrees for 10 minutes, you see an enormous difference in their skin response. That's more or less the same what you see in human beings as well. You see in an allergic reaction, you see an anaphylactic shock. You see the skin response, and that's what we simulate in mice here as well. So we see a huge difference after only the milk was heated, not homogenized or not defatted or whatever, but we already see it if only the raw milk, the same raw milk, was heated at 80 degrees. What we see is that there is quite some correlation with one important indicator, which is the beta-lactoglobulin. This is a molecule which is present in the whey of cow's milk and not in human milk, and for that reason it might be that it's bringing up this allergic response. What you see here is that in an in vitro study they measure the immunoreactivity, and I plotted it here against the 20 degrees heating. And what you see here is that at temperatures below 60 degrees, you see hardly any increase in immunoreactivity. At the moment that we go above 60 degrees, and especially in this part from 60 to 80 degrees, you see a huge increase of immunoreactivity. And later on, if you heat it at higher temperature, this immunoreactivity goes down. It has to do this complex molecule, this beta-lactoglobulin, is defolded, so the structure is changed, and we see all kind of immunoreactive problems. This beta-lactoglobulin is also already used in a so-called cow barn pill, which is been developed last year by the Austrian colleagues, and they have been using two phenomena. One is if children consume raw milk, it's in connection with the mucosa of the mouse, the mouse and the gut. So it's coming. You are drinking the milk and it comes into your gut. You don't see this allergic reaction with raw milk, but we see the same principle of not becoming allergic if the children are in the environment of the cows. So if they are playing in the barn, if they're in the direct environment, and it has to do that this beta-lactoglobulin is also excreted in the cow's urine. So then it's inhaled through the nose and also coming into contact with the mucosa of the children. But this is one of the first things which comes from the raw milk research, that people developed a kind of pill which is already tested and where they could show that it's reducing asthma. Going to a next topic, which is more the positive side, because milk has been consumed as fermented milk. And so we have a lot of farmhouse dairy products which are part of our diet. And that's based on two principles, the lactic acid bacteria, which are causing this fermentation, and we are using the rennet. In the past, it was always from raw milk, and in the modern time, it was from, it's much more from pasteurized milk. So we are dealing with a huge cultural heritage, which is based on this raw fermented dairy. And I show here some pictures mainly from Europe. So the Gouda cheese, this is the cheese made in the mountains. This is the pecorino, which is from the sheep in Italy, for instance. But we have a lot of cultural heritage where we use this raw fermented dairy. Dairy is not that bad, and this is one study, and there are a lot of studies, but this is one prospective studies published by Michaelson, and he shows here a difference in the consumption of fermented milk and the cheese on one hand in relation to the fresh milk. And what you see here, if you look at the control group, which has less than 1 serving of milk or dairy products per day, 1 till 2, 2 till 3, and this is the high consuming part of the population. You see that the risk of getting here problems with cardiovascular disease deaths, you see that it's decreasing at the moment that these people are consuming fermented milk products, or as a milk, a drinking milk, or as a cheese. In this study, they found a negative association, so an increase in cardiovascular deaths when these women were drinking fresh milk. This is not found in all studies. By the way, they didn't look only at cardiovascular diseases, also at osteoporosis, and then the graph is more or less the same. To jump to the question, what kind of milk, if you want to drink milk, what kind of milk should you drink or could you drink? And one important thing is the milk fat quality. Milk fat quality reflects strongly the season, the intensification of dairy farming, and the diet of the cow. So if you look at one side, we in the last, let's say, 60 till 80 years, we have increased the height of our cows, the weight of our cows, and that has huge consequences. We are doing that because we need more energy-dense food in our cows. They want to have a constant diet. They feed the cow corn silage, they feed the cow concentrates, they feed the cow more and more fat, because all these things have much more energy than the grass itself. But it means that finally these cows are held in, like in the United States, in large feedlots, or in Western Europe, they stay inside the whole year around in barns. That's very different to, in this case, the biodynamic farm Hoofddanwisch, where the cows are getting outside in early spring. But what's important, and that's what you see in this picture, that's a study we've been doing at Kassel University in the beginning of 2010, around 2010. We compared biodynamic low input farms here on the right to conventional high input farms. I leave the other two-way farm types away, but we can significantly differentiate the milk fat quality in summer, which is based on all kinds of bioactive fatty acids. So the CLAs, its precursor omega-3 fatty acids, which are much higher in this biodynamic low input system. And if you connect that with what the farmers are doing, you see they are feeding grass products. There is a huge access to roughage. In the contrast, what you see, so the missing of these important fatty acids is based on an increase of this Holstein Friesian population, the feeding of maize, silage, and a lot of concentrate. So it's not magic what's happening here, but it's you can show it in a clear picture. Why are these things so important? This is done by my colleague at in Jena at the university. They are feeding this so-called ruminic acid, this cis-9T11 CLA, which is what we call the grass CLA, to rats. If you feed that in high amounts, you see quite a normal animal if it's killed. This is the liver of the animal. However, if you change this ratio and you come into another type of CLA, which is the T10 CLA, it's a small difference, but you see that the fatty liver syndrome is developing, and all the fat in the body of the animal is concentrating around the liver. So what I'm trying to show you is that these bioactive, in this case, fatty acids, they really affect your health as well. There are good markers, and this is one of the markers developed from the United States. And I talked with you about this CLA, but another marker is the relationship between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids, which is for grass milk, the bottom line, it's around 1. But if you go to the confined system with a minimum of forage, you see there is an overload of omega-6 fatty acids in this milk fat. And that has to do with the feeding of all kinds of soy and other type of maize, etc.
Don, can we get 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I'm almost done. I have three slides, no problem.
Oh, I saw 64, so I thought, okay.
No, don't. Another thing I would like to stress on is that grazing cows produce other things than only healthy fat. They also produce a lot of vitamin D. And this was a nice study done in Denmark, where they covered cows with a horse blanket on the skin of the cow, and here only on the other. And the cows were staying outside, and they were measuring on a daily basis how the amount of vitamin D was going up in the milk fat. And the hypothesis was that only the part where there was no fur on the cow, there the cow could metabolize this vitamin D. This was not the case. It shows that also the cow is using her whole body area to build up this vitamin D. So bringing cows outside is not alone only a grazing situation for the cow, but it also brings healthy fat with a lot of vitamin D. Something about a recent study on the greenhouse gas emission. This was done in Germany, in the province of Schleswig-Holstein, north of Hamburg. This is the average farm from Schleswig-Holstein. They produce around 9,500 kilograms of milk per cow. And what they are looking for is to increase this yield, because the whole thing where people are looking after in this whole greenhouse gas emission discussion is to increase the yield so you can have less emission per cow. But there are also other strategies, and this is the strategy of a grass-based farm without hardly any inputs, and this is also a grass-based farm with some edible crops. And this is a completely other strategy. If you look at two figures, this is the nitrogen balance of the farm. So this is how much nitrogen surplus there is per hectare. You see that these farms are much, much higher than those grass-based systems. On the other hand, you also see that these greenhouse gas emissions are strongly going down if you go to these grass-based systems without any inputs from outside. So this is also a very important thing to have in mind if you talk about the grass-based system. If you want to do it properly, you should go for a spring calving herd, and the surplus of which is an increase of your milk in between March and April. The grass is starting to grow in Western Europe. The grass intake is huge of these animals, and in winter you don't produce hardly or any milk. The surpluses of this milk are put into butter and into cheese, which has also a healthy fatty acid profile. If you summarize the thing, and that's why I said in my first slide, how can we connect the dots? It's about connecting the dots for a health-oriented milk consumption. And Denise Leron already mentioned Hippocrates, and he talked about "let food be thy medicine." That's one part of his quote. I think we should go for less meat and milk consumption because we need less food miles. This is necessary. But if we want to consume these things, we should go for a high quality. So this is the local processed milk. I think we should much more focus on the raw and the raw fermented foods because they are much more healthy. They are local and they can also reduce the health costs. So these are the products like the raw fermented milk, like kefir and the cheese. I would say go for grass and pasture-based systems because they deliver a more healthy fat. I would say do not avoid milk fat, but go for a high quality of milk fat. So grass-based dairy from summer milk surpluses. And the recent research also shows that the milk from grass-based breeds and grass-based systems, they increase the lifetime of the animals and they reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So that has to do with the CO2 equivalents in a lifetime or produced per kilogram of milk. The last one, I want to thank my colleagues from the Department of Immunopharmacology. I want to thank Hoofd Danwisch, which is one of the parties in research in the Raw Milk Company in the Netherlands, and for financing my research, the Software AG Stiftung in Germany. Thank you very much.